Good afternoon. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Aquatico C-Star V2. This watch is available from aquaticowatch.com for €269 including FedEx shipping. So firstly, let's look at the box that the watch comes in, and then I'll talk you through the other items one gets with the piece. So the C-Star V2 comes in a wooden watch box which is protected by this black cardboard outer sleeve which one removes. And this is the watch box itself. Now bearing in mind that this is a low tier price point piece at only €269, Aquatico deserve full credit for using a solid wooden watch box at this price point rather than the default option which is a cardboard or plastic watch box. The interior is nicely lined with a felt fabric, and as you can see there are foam cut up panels in the base which house the various items. So with the watch one gets this vintage tropic style strap which I'll show you. I like the grid formation of the perforation underneath. It allows for sweat and perspiration to wick away from the wrist. It's made from silicone rubber, very soft and supple, and so it's going to be very comfortable to wear for long periods of time, and the vents in the perforation allow for air to travel through it, so these are very comfortable to wear in warm weather or when one is active. One thick sliding keeper, mirror polishing to the hardware, as you can see, solid stainless steel, mirror polished, and the buckle and tang are signed with Aquatico to a high standard. So it's a very well made vintage tropic style strap, and this is a good alternative to the bracelet that comes on the watch, so nice to see it included with the C-Star V2. One also gets this leaflet which one folds out. This is the owner's instruction manual, clear concise diagrams, and the instructions are in English, so very useful read for unfamiliar with the movement used, which is the Seiko NH35A automatic. And lastly, one also gets this plastic guarantee card, and I'm pleased to report that the C-Star V2 is covered by a 2-year international guarantee, which is very reassuring. So, with regards to the specifications of the piece, this is the Aquatico C-Star V2. This is the NH35A version, which is €269, and I'm pleased to report that Aquatico also produced the C-Star V2 in another version with the Salita SW200-1, and I think it's a credit to a micro brand to be offering the watch with two versions, either the NH35A or the SW200-1 respectively. So it's good that they're producing watches for collectors with various budgets, and I think that that is something that's very impressive. 42mm case diameter. It has a 49.3mm lug-to-lug measurement. The thickness is 14.4mm, including the double dome sapphire crystal, and the lug width is 22mm. The oyster style bracelet has a slight taper from 22mm at the lugs down to the flip-lock clasp, and as you can see the flip-lock clasp is signed to a high standard with Aquatico engraved. Nice luster to the 316L grade stainless steel. I'm pleased to report that there are 4 micro adjustment holes. As you'll know from my previous reviews, I'm usually critical of brands only having 2 or 3 micro adjustment holes. 4 does allow for good adjustment on the length of the bracelet, and they have also included half links in the bracelet, as you can see, and that allows for fine tuning of the bracelet length, so they deserve credit for getting these things right. So 120 click unidirectional bezel. Let's test the bezel action. Good foam resistance. I like the loud audible clicks. I also like the foam resistance to the bezel action. No lateral side to side play whatsoever. No back plate whatsoever. It is a very well executed bezel. So I'll just check the alignment. Perfect. The red triangle around the Lume pip at 12 o'clock perfectly aligns with the 12 o'clock index on the dial, so this is a very well executed bezel and I'm very impressed by it. With regards to the finishing of the bezel, it's solid 316L grade stainless steel, coin edge finished, and we have an undercut underneath the coin edge finishing. Nice mirror polishing to the coin edge finishing, as you can see, and I like the way the coin edge bezel catches the light. It really does have a nice vintage aesthetic because it is low profile, and the undercut adds to it. It looks absolutely beautiful. Complements the navy blue ceramic bezel insert, which is infilled with patina lume, as you can see. They've got the colour match of the C3 Superluminova on the applied indices, the hands and also the bezel done very well. This is something that often microbrands get wrong. There's often a colour mismatch when using patina lume like this between the hands and the applied indices, or the inlay in the ceramic bezel insert on the Arabic numerals and the hour markers, but they've got the match of the lume on all three perfect. The navy blue dial complements the navy blue ceramic bezel insert, and the red contrasting second hand also complements the red triangle around the lume pip. So it's very nicely executed, and I think Aquatico deserve full credit for not just producing an homage to a Rolex or an homage to a Tudor such as the Black Bay. This is a completely unique design. The layout of the bezel, the applied indices and the design of the hands are unique to Aquatico. So I like it. It is a very similar profile to a Tudor Black Bay in the 41mm, but it has enough differences to make this unique, such as the double dome sapphire crystal, which has blue tinted AR coating on the underside. One thing I really like about it is the use of female pivoted end links. They give a better fit than male end links, and bear in mind this is a large piece with a 49.3mm lug to lug measurement, so it really does benefit from the use of female pivoted end links, which are very well executed. Good tight fit to the case, and the finishing is done very well. The bracelet is finished to a good standard, nice luster to the 316L grade stainless steel, as you can see. Brushed satin finishing to the top side, underside and flanks. One improvement I would like to see Aquatico make is to upgrade the push pins in the bracelet to screw pins, but however this is subjective. Some collectors like push pins because they do make resizing the bracelet very easy. On the underside we have a screw down exhibition case back, which is stainless steel and glazed with a mineral crystal. Although the Seiko NH35A is undecorated, it is nice to see it through an exhibition case back. Concentric brush satin finishing to the exhibition case back, and it's laser engraved to a high standard with the specification around the circumference. I like the fact that Aquatico have branded the rotor on the NH35A with Aquatico. It does add interest to it, and it makes the movement look more interesting. So the finishing of the exhibition case back is very good, and also the finishing to the case is very good throughout, and the solid end links. So I'll give you a wrist shot and you can see how it fits on my 8-inch wrist. Now I haven't sized the bracelet, I've simply taken the watch out of the watch box, and I'm pleased to report that it fits my 8-inch wrist with no difficulty whatsoever, as you can see. This bracelet would actually fit up to an 8.5-inch wrist, because I can easily slip my index finger underneath the bracelet and clasp at all times, and I have an 8-inch wrist, so as you can see this would fit an 8.5-inch wrist no problem. There is a slight taper on the 20mm bracelet, which does work very well down to the flip-lock clasp. I think they've got the taper correct. The 22mm lug width balances the 42mm head of the piece very well. Now the thing to note is this is a tall piece at 14.4mm. It's not easily going to slip underneath the shirt cuff if you wear business shirts. It is a tall piece, but despite being very tall, it doesn't feel top heavy. It does feel very balanced due to using a 22mm bracelet. So they've got the proportions correct. 22mm bracelet on a 42mm head of the piece works very well. Nice taper to the lugs. So the proportions are good. Now I personally would like to see Aquatico produce this C-Star V2 in a 40mm version, with a 20mm lug width and a bracelet tapering from 20 down to 16. The reason why I say that is for collectors with a smaller wrist of 6 to 7 inches, this piece is too large. 42mm with a 49.3mm lug to lug measurement makes it a very tall piece, but it's also a very long piece as well. So the other thing to note is it is incredibly heavy. It's one of the heaviest watches I've reviewed on my channel, 180 grams with all the links in the Oyster style bracelet. Now of course, if you remove 4 or 5 links from the bracelet, if you are a collector with a 6 to 7 inch wrist, that will significantly reduce the 180 grams to circa 160, but it still is significantly heavy. And you notice the heft on wrist. I have an 8-inch wrist and I feel the wrist presence and the heft. 180 grams is a heavy watch. So for long periods of time, if you're going to wear this as a daily wear piece for 8 to 12 hours per day, for example, you will find 42mm at 180 grams to be a very heavy piece. It doesn't feel top heavy, it does feel balanced, but it does feel heavy. So I would say perhaps the navy blue Tropic strap would be a better option if you're looking for comfort as well as feel good factor. As you can see, the interior of the flip-lock clasp is finished to a very high standard, solid milled stainless steel, and it's engraved with stainless steel upside down, as you can see. Brass satin finish to the top side, underside and flanks, and finished to a very high standard. So let's test the bezel action. 120 click unidirectional bezel, as one would expect. Good foam resistance to it. It's a pleasant surprise. No lateral side-to-side play whatsoever. No back play whatsoever. It's a very tight bezel action. I like the heavy clicks. I like the loud audible sound of the clicks. And it feels very similar to a Seiko bezel action, or alternatively a Steinhardt bezel action, if you're familiar with those. I like the fact it's tight with no play whatsoever. It's very reassuring. It gives a feeling of quality. And the coin edge finishing makes it very grippy, so it's very aesthetically pleasing, but it also serves a purpose because with the undercuts, the coin edge finishing, it gives good friction. One can get good purchase on it with one's index finger and thumb, so it's very well executed. I'll just check the alignment. Perfect. The red triangle around the Lume pip aligns perfectly with the triangle index at 12 o'clock. So no lateral side-to-side play, no back play, and perfect alignment. Good bezel action, and as a microband, Aquatico deserve full credit for getting the bezel action correct. So coin edge finished, solid 316L grade stainless steel crown, as you can see, signed with the Aquatico brand emblem, finished to a high standard. Let's test the action. Absolutely silky smooth. Another pleasant surprise. Minimal resistance required to unscrew it. It's got the characteristic pop of the NH35A movement. It pushes the winding stem out of the movement in the first position. So one can manually wind it to top it up to its maximum 40-hour power reserve. Absolute pleasure to manually wind the NH35A. One can feel the resistance in the mainspring gradually building up. Now, bearing in mind, this doesn't have a date complication. They do make a snowflake hand version of the C-Star V2, and that does have a date complication. I personally prefer the symmetry of this version, which doesn't have a date complication, but there is, of course, a phantom click position. One can feel a phantom date wheel position because the date wheel still remains underneath the dial rotating, even though the date complication is absent. So pulling it out to the final click position hacks the movement. As you can see, I've now stopped the movement dead, and one can set the time. Absolutely silky smooth in both clockwise and anti-clockwise directions. Very light resistance to the gearing in the NH35A. It's one of my favourite movements. I really like the feeling of it. It's a pleasure to manually wind, but it's also a pleasure to set the time because it feels silky smooth. I like the low friction feeling of it. It's a good, reliable, solid, well-proven workhorse movement. Pushing the crown back in, it's got a nice positive click, and that restarts the movement. As you can see, the contrasting red second hand begins to sweep around the dial again. So I'll just test screwing it back down. Absolutely silky smooth, immediate thread pickup. Aquatico deserve full credit because this is a very good quality crown execution. Bearing in mind it's a low tier price point piece at €269. They've got the bezel action very good, and they've also got the crown action very good. Minimal resistance. One can feel the quality of the threading on the internal thread of the stainless steel crown and the external thread of the crown tube. When they interface well, when they're smooth, they don't feel gritty. When a crown and crown tube are poorly made, when they're poorly executed, the threading feels rough, it feels gritty. So there's friction there, but when there's no friction there, when it's smooth, it means it's been threaded very well, both on the internal thread of the crown and the external thread of the crown tube. There's no friction between the stainless steel rubbing against each other. So they deserve full credit because this is one of the better crown actions I've experienced, and certainly within the low tier it's very good. So let's do a Lume test and we'll see how the Lume performs when it's charged up to the absolute maximum. So as always, I'm going to use my 100 UV LED torch to charge it up to its absolute peak. Now this uses C3 Superluminova, and as you'll know from my previous reviews, that is a personal favourite of mine. I like the blue tone of BGW9 and I also like the green tone of C3. Right, so that's now fully charged, and as you can see, it has not disappointed. Outstanding. It's top grade C3 Superluminova. It's glowing brightly and it's continuing to glow for a good length of time. Credit to Aquatico for including a fully lumed ceramic bezel insert at this price point. They've done a good job of infilling the Arabic numerals and the hour markers with C3 Superluminova. Also, the Lume pip is glowing brightly, and I think they've done a good job matching the tone on the applied indices, the hands, and also the ceramic bezel inserts. The colour match, the green tone of the C3 is the same on all three. The bezel, the applied indices, and the hands. That's something that often micro brands in the low tier get wrong. There's often a colour mismatch between the dial and hands, or alternatively the bezel and the hands and applied indices. So, outstanding. I like the arrowhead tip to the sweeping contrasting red second hand, and also it's easy to clearly differentiate between the baton style minute hand and the Milsub style sword hand. The dial is very well executed. I like the symmetry of the applied indices, and I like the loomed triangle at the 12 o'clock index. It's got good orientation. So it's continuing to glow for a good length of time. As you can see, the brightness is good. It's good quality C3 Superluminova, so I'm very pleased with that. Right, so let's discuss the movement used in the piece. It's the Seiko NH35A automatic, which you will all be familiar with. It's a very reliable, well-proven workhorse movement used by several low-tier brands and also micro brands. 24 joules, it runs at 21,600 vibrations per hour and a frequency of 3 Hz. It has hand winding and hacking, which use for complications, and the 40-hour power reserve is perfectly acceptable. The stated accuracy of the NH35A is -20 to +40 seconds per day. Now I'm pleased to report that this one has been well regulated, and it's running at +6 seconds per day, which is very impressive, bearing in mind the low tier price point of this piece, €269. So I think +6 seconds per day is perfectly acceptable, and I like the NH35A because of its reliability. It's a very reliable, well-made movement, and I think it is the correct choice for this piece. Now, the thing to bear in mind is if you like the watch but you're looking for a higher grade of movement, bear in mind they also produce the same watch using the Sellita SW200-1, which again is a reliable, well-proven workhorse Swiss movement. So that's something to consider, the NH35A or the SW200-1. So, lastly, I'll summarise the piece. What do I think of it overall? Well, when I'm considering reviewing a watch on my channel, the watch should meet 2 criteria. It should be both excellent quality and excellent value at the respective price point. At €269, yes, it is excellent quality, and yes, it is excellent value. I'm very impressed with the quality control, the build quality and the finishing throughout. The bezel execution is excellent, the crown execution is excellent. Now, the only negative is it is a heavy piece. 180 grams is significant heft. That's something to bear in mind. It's also a very thick piece. It's tall at 14.4 millimeters. So, really, it's a watch that best suits collectors with a 7 to 8 inch wrist. I would say if you're a collector with a smaller wrist of 6 to 7 inches, you can rule this watch out because it's too heavy and too large to be comfortable to wear on the bracelet. Even fitting it on the Tropic strap supplied, you will find it to be a large piece because it does have a rather long 49.3mm lug to lug, even though it does have a good curve to the underside of the case. But having said that, if you're a collector with a large wrist of 7 to 8 inches, you will thoroughly enjoy the 42mm head of the piece and also enjoy the wrist presence and the heft of 180 grams. So I think it is an excellent watch. I think it's excellent quality and excellent value, but only if you're a collector with a 7 to 8 inch wrist. If you have a 6 to 7 inch wrist, it's going to be too heavy and too large for comfort. I would like to see, as I've discussed in the review, Aquatico produce the same watch, both with the Sellita SW200-1 and the Seiko NH35A respectively, but in a reduced size, a 40mm head of the piece with a 20mm bracelet rather than 22. Because I think the design is very well executed. It's a beautiful looking watch. I like the quality of the materials, the finishing. It's a great looking watch, but it's just too large and too thick. So in 40mm with a say 48mm lug to lug measurement, this would appeal to a lot of collectors with a 6 to 7 inch wrist. So I'm hoping that Aquatico will produce the C-Style V2 but in a 40mm version rather than this 42. So I'm going to declare it a champagne watch for lemonade money. I hope you've enjoyed my review of the Aquatico C-Style V2. Please feel free to post your own comments below the video. Thank you very much.